This sweater is too tight and too warm, and I am just not having any fun. Hey yo, Merry Happy. My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with the Regular Dude. Today we're going to be talking about The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This is coming out on Christmas Eve, so it's the last of my holiday season series run. I don't know. This is like a retelling, a reimagination, or continuation, an abomination of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. You know, Ebenezer Scrooge and all that. I'm going to do this review like I've done the last couple of reviews where I do like a spoiler-free section, so I'll go through the premise, do the 4 C's, which is character, conflict, context, and craft. Then I'm going to get into spoilers and rants and go through the notes that I took while I was reading. Because no one's told me that they dislike that format, and I still don't really know what I'm doing. But dude, it's been like 5 months of you making videos. Yeah, I know. I should learn. I don't. So yeah, let me just pull up that premise real quick. On Christmas Eve 5 years ago, Holly was visited by 3 ghosts who showed her how selfish and spoiled she'd become. They tried to convince her to mend her ways. She didn't. Then she died. Now she's stuck working for the top secret company Project Scrooge as the latest ghost of Christmas past. Every year they save another miserly grouch. Every year Holly stays frozen at 17 while her family and friends go on living without her. So far, Holly's afterlife has been miserable. But this year, everything's about to change. I tried to look this up on Google Books, and there was no premise. It was before the fall meets Bah Humbug, and that's all it said. And I was like, that's not enough. So I'm looking up on Goodreads, and it has a pretty high rating, I guess, 3.96. I think it's pretty good, right? I think it's pretty good because spoilers for the end of my review. I didn't like this book that much. Anyway, let's get into the spoiler-free section of this review. So for those of you who don't remember or don't know, I used the 4 C's method that I learned from a video by Reads with Rachel, and it's character, conflict, context, and craft. So I just kind of analyzed those 4 different aspects of a book. Obviously, there's you could add more if you wanted to, I guess, and I have once before added a 5th C. Anyways, so let's start with character. Kind of the only character we really get to know in any sort of depth is the titular character, Holly Chase. We do get a little glimpse into the sort of sad, tragic pasts of a couple other characters, Ethan and Stephanie, and, we don't get to know them in a lot of depth, but we do see, they have some stuff that they're going through, but, they don't really go in arcs because it's all about Holly. And one of the reasons that I don't love this book is because it's all about Holly, and I hate Holly. I think in past reviews I've kind of softballed it and I've just been I didn't find this character super likable, and it was really hard for me to root for this character, blah da 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 da, something like that. No, I just hate this character. I hate this character so much. To the point where was rooting against her. I'm the primary antagonist in this story because I am enjoying her be miserable. Sorry, I came in with a lot of hostility there. That was unnecessary. I do find this character profoundly unlikable, and I understand that is completely the point, right? She didn't learn her lesson, and now she's sort of in this position where she's participating in this thing she thinks is bullshit and nonsense. She hates Christmas. She doesn't think that she's a bad person, and now she's being punished for being not a bad person, and she doesn't think it's justifiable. It isn't fair, and she's lost everything that she feels like she's owed or deserved or entitled to, and all this stuff. I understand that is sort of the point of the story. It's an elongated character arc for Ebenezer Scrooge, right? She didn't learn her lesson, she died. I already said that. Yeah, I get that that's the point, but it was just such an unpleasant reading experience for me because every decision this character makes, because she's still spoiled and selfish and does not understand that other people have lives and other people matter, it was just really hard for me to care about anything that she was struggling with, or anytime she was sad or was feeling down on herself or feeling insecure. I was where, somebody call a wambulance. I just did not care, and I was completely unsympathetic to her trials and tribulations. I understood all of that was sad. I just didn't care about her because I disliked her so much. There's very little that reveal is kind of late in the book. Like I think like maybe 40 or 50% of the way through the book. And by that point, I've spent like half the book, 200 pages, just disliking this kid. And the development of this character, or the lesson that's being learned, is very like maybe 80% of the book she is the same. She is like a static character. Then like another like 10% of the book, the ice starts to melt and there's like cracks in the armor and all that metaphor, yada yada, where she is starting to feel something, and it's starting to like regret things, and then it's just like different person. And I think in the Christmas Carol, I didn't pay much mind to it because it always feels like a fast paced, almost like a short story, and I grew up with it, so I never really asked any questions about it. But after like going through this book, I'm like, do I even like A Christmas Carol, or do I just like the Muppets Christmas Carol because the Muppets? Like the songs in that movie are so like that movie's so funny. Like that movie's so much fun. Come on. I would have way rather done a reaction to a Muppets Christmas Carol than. And then like I said before, they're like I guess the two secondary characters is Ethan, who's like the love interest of the book, and he is a Scrooge, and he doesn't really like grow or change, but we do get to know him a little bit and understand why he is the way that he is, because it's like part of Holly's job is to learn why he is the way that he is so that they can rehabilitate him by the haunting that happens on Christmas Eve. And I didn't like him. Like he's so just there to be the love interest and to be, like I don't know. He's just there to kind of be the love interest and to be like a foil or a mirror for Holly, to help her like learn to self-reflect or whatever. And so yeah, he's almost more of a plot device than a character. And I would almost say the same thing about Stephanie, who is like an intern at Project Scrooge and Holly's assistant. And anything else I say about her is a spoiler. So she's there too, and she seems sweet. She seems like a nice lady. She seems like the kind of person you'd want to get a coffee with. And yeah, there's other characters, but they are like tertiary characters. They're background characters, and they don't matter much. Okay, let's move on to conflict. This isn't like a super eventful book. Like there's a lot of conflict in it, but it's not like, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's more like they're on a time crunch, and things get messy because Holly is like attracted to Ethan and feels like she understands him and feels sort of like a kindred spirit connection to him. That is a ghost pun, by the way. So things get really messy when she decides to break protocol and visit Ethan in his day-to-day life, because Holly, I'll get more into it in context, which is like the world building section, but Holly is a ghost, but she's not like a see-through, go through walls type of ghost. She's more like a zombie that doesn't rot. So things get really messy, and Holly's going through a little bit of internal conflict. I guess that is kind of the main conflict, is that she ends up attracted to him, and she wants to keep him for herself because she's a selfish person, but also she has to do her job because she can't lose her job, because then she's going to hell. I'll probably get more into it. No, I probably won't. And like the romance between these two characters feels very like, maybe I should have put this in character. Whatever, doesn't matter. It's sort of like the romance is a conflict because it's also like it's a problem, right? So that's why it counts in here. Fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want. The romance between these two, it feels really superficial. Like they just both think the other is hot and are down to kind of like, I don't know, just have fun. Like Holly definitely just feels kind of understood by him, kind of, but also not at all, because she has to lie about who she is and her family situation and her life and all that shit, because she didn't have a life. She's dead. Yeah, it is very superficial, and there isn't like any sweetness or any like tender moments where it's like, oh, this is really sweet, this is really cute, or something like that. But yeah, there isn't a ton, like this isn't the most eventful book I've ever read. The plot's moving forward, it's kind of slow and uneventful, and there isn't a lot of tension being built. So so I just didn't really care about what was happening per se. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, and I'll get more into it in the rant part, but the stakes were never raised. The stakes stayed very low, but not in like a cozy fantasy sort of way, just in a like, it's not that big a deal kind of way. I guess at the very end, you could say that the stakes get raised a bit. Like the stakes don't get super high, but that's where the climax things are raised and things do kind of hit the fan and whatnot. But yeah, like at that point, I was kind of emotionally checked out to the point I'm like, okay, let's see what they do. And then I definitely don't want to spoil this until the rant part, but like I hated that ending. Like I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. Anyways, moving on to context. So context is like world building and politics. This is set kind of, I guess, in our world, but also like it's like a low fantasy, right? So it's like our world, but there's this like fantastical, ghosty, Christmassy element to it. And here's the thing. I think this is maybe the second or third thing I've consumed, like movie, TV show, book, whatever, where they kind of do a retelling, a reimagining, continuation on of A Christmas Carol, but they also reference the Christmas Carol, and it always confuses me if the Christmas Carol is supposed to have happened and also be this super popular, beloved IP. And I guess it's both in these contexts, but it always throws me off for like a second, because then I guess Charles Dickens isn't like a writer so much as a historian. I don't know. And like I get if you want to build off the premise and also kind of like make fun of it or parody it a little bit to be self-aware, kind of meta, you do have to kind of also make sure people know what it is, or make sure that the characters know the story so they can be like, wait a minute, I've seen this movie, or like, whoa, now you're gonna haunt me or whatever. But it's never not. I don't know. I don't love it. When I first, like, I didn't dive deep into the premise, but I understood that, like, Holly was going to die and then be the next ghost. I thought that was a really cool idea. But the way the author kind of chose to do this, I think, it was just a lot of stuff that I wouldn't do. You know what I'm saying? Like, so Holly isn't a ghost. Holly's undead. But she's like a zombie that doesn't rot, and every day at the time that she died, her body like resets and goes back to the way that it was right before she died. I think that the way that ghosts or the undead are done in this book is so that she's flesh and blood, so that she can have this romance relationship with Ethan, which I'm not crazy about, and I'm gonna get into more of that in a second or in a few minutes or whatever. But I did just need to mention it. That I think that she's not a ghost proper because they need to have this romance, and so Ethan needs to be able to like not physically see. No, I guess yeah, physically see and touch and talk to Holly and stuff like that. I feel like there was a way where like a proper ghost, like a go through walls, ooh kind of ghost could have like had a magic power to make themselves visible, and like they didn't need to be like flesh and blood and all that stuff, but whatever. I also thought it was really strange that most of the people who work at Project Scrooge aren't dead, and Project Scrooge is like an office in, I think, Manhattan. There's a bunch of stuff that isn't really explained that like really didn't need to be, but it was kind of odd. So, like, Holly dies in California and then wakes up in New York. And there's never... So, in my head, like, if you're a spirit, you're a ghost or whatever, that's fine. And even, if the office building was in New York, but everybody in there is a ghost doing purgatory, like, I thought that could have been pretty interesting. And that's what I thought was going to happen. Like, you know how, like, Jacob Marley from A Christmas Carol is like bound up in chains. He's just like roaming the earth or whatever. I was like, oh, what if they employ a bunch of Jacob Marley types where like they're serving out their sentence by working for this company? It's better than hell, but it's not as good as heaven or whatever. But no, it's just like there's like, tech engineers and like MIT graduates and shit. And I was like, it's weird. And all the ghosts are just these like non-rotting zombies, and their forms are costumes. So like Holly looks like a regular 17-year-old girl, but on Christmas Eve they like dress her up in these like crazy robes that light up, and then Present gets his sort of Santa Claus with a wreath for a crown type of deal, and then the future has his cloak and all that shit. And each one gets a sort of power, but also the powers aren't that powerful. So like Holly can read the past, and then the present can read your mind, and the future can see the future, and that's kind of it. And I don't know, like it's not that big a deal, but it did feel kind of underwhelming, where it could have been more interesting if like Holly could turn invisible. She does like turn invisible because she has a magic hoodie that if you pull the hoodie on, that she turns invisible. So when she's not working, she sneaks into movie theaters and stalks her best friend. She doesn't do that a lot. That happens in the book. But I don't know. There were a lot of like world building decisions on how to do like ghosts and how to do this like bureaucratic, this is how we do the hauntings type of thing that I would have done differently. And I'm not saying that any of that's bad. I'm just saying that I was kind of expecting something else, or thought something else would be kind of cooler or more to like my liking, and I didn't love it, but I don't think any of it's bad. Like the stuff that needs to be explained is explained. I just don't like it. More on how this company works, because I think that's necessary for the world building, is like, because it's mostly like living, breathing, regular people doing this shit. They're like, it's kind of Men in Black in a way, right? Or something, where it's like it's operating in plain sight or whatever. And the Ghost of Christmas Present, like he has like a whole team staff, and they just set up cameras all over the place, and they just kind of watch this dude live his life and try to figure out the best people to bring him to during Christmas Eve and Christmas past. Every night, her and her team kind of like portal into, because there's portals, portal into this dude's bedroom, and she reads his past by holding his hand, and she has like this power enhancing electrode thing that she puts on her head, and then she can sift through his memories. So there's a lot of like scenes where she does that, and we get like kind of glimpses into like Ethan's past and his tragic memories and all this stuff. And in a way I was like, it's kind of cool. I dig it. And it makes sense that you have to do it a lot so that we have something to do. The whole, like, I think they declare Ethan Winters the Scrooge in like February or March, and then spend the rest of the year researching him so they're ready for Christmas Eve. And the company assigns different people in Ethan's life. Like these are the people we're going to bring up by like comparing them to characters from A Christmas Carol. So like, okay, so who's the Marley? Who's the Cratchit? Who's the Fozziwig or whatever? And I was like, okay, whatever, like that's fine. You know, if you're gonna do this, it makes sense that they're like really relying on the structure of A Christmas Carol. But yeah, that's pretty much it on context. Let's move on to craft. I don't think that the craft, like the writing or the prose, is bad at all. I do think that it kind of lacked a certain flavor. And I've said this about other like YA books that I've read before, but I think that a lot of YA authors could probably be screenwriters, because I feel like if this was a movie, I would have liked it more maybe. It's probably harder to get a screenplay that you've written made than to have a book you wrote published. I don't know that for sure, because I am not a screenwriter, nor am I an author. Like, so I'm just like running my mouth a little bit, but it just feels like a lot of them, these would feel more, they feel like TV shows. They feel like, you know, sort of like not low budget, but like medium budget, yeah, maybe low budget, like Netflix movies and that kind of shit. And I feel like they'd be popular. But then again, I wonder if that's because of the intended audience. But yeah, there wasn't like a ton of, the prose wasn't like stunning, but it also wasn't sloppy. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't like, why would you say it like that? There might have been a couple of times where a line, like, I might have gone like, huh? But it just wasn't worth, like, taking note of. All right, I will say, like, me being an adult man, like, basically, like, the demographic that I'm in, I don't think I could relate to this character at all, so I couldn't tell if the voice was spot on or, like, way off. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if an actual 17-year-old girl would read this and be like, this character's so relatable. I totally understand where she's coming from. Like, yeah, totally. I don't know if a 17-year-old girl would, relate to this character. I know I didn't, because I've never been a 17-year-old girl. I've also never been rich. Also, I don't know where in the YA space this was meant to be, right? Like, I would have guessed, like, this could be for, like, 12 to 14-year-olds. And then I'd be like, oh, yeah, this is great. But I just don't know. Yeah, I know I'm kind of out of order, and I'm sorry about that. This character was so frustrating for me to read. I was like, you remember last week when I was talking about like being at work and I'm like, on an excavator just listening to fairy smut. So I'm just like driving my excavator. And, woo, woo. This time around, I just kept going like, oh. And my crew kept being like, are you good? Do you need to talk to somebody? And then I was trying to explain the book to them, and they were like, yeah, dog, we don't care. I don't know why you do this to yourself, man. I was like, yeah, I don't either. I was complaining in my Discord server for patrons about this book, and one of my patrons, Suzanne, made this meme, which I thought was really funny, and I like don't fretters. That's funny. I might change it from like don't fret club members to don't fretters or something. That's it for my spoiler-free review. So if any of y'all were like, you know what? I'm intrigued by that spoiler-free review. I'm gonna go check it out for myself. Then hop off now. So yeah, I'm gonna just go through my notes. So the book opens up with Holly just being a shitty person and kind of talking about who she is. Her stepmom like dies at the beginning, and her stepmom is her Jacob Marley. So like it starts off just like A Christmas Carol in that way. She kind of explains who she is. Her dad's a director, and he's famous, and she's rich, and she's really mean to her housekeeper, and just does not care about like I don't know, just does the whole like, you have to work on Christmas, you have to make me pancakes, and I don't give a shit about your daughter and all this shit. And then she gets hit by a car, and basically the first like 30% of the book, I didn't take notes because I was like, I don't care what's happening with this kid. But yeah, she dies, she gets recruited, and then she's done. She's been the ghost of Christmas Past for 5 years when the story kind of like picks up again. So the story picks up, they rehabilitate a Scrooge or whatever, they do the whole thing. Holly's just like, I fucking hate my life, I hate all this shit, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, okay, job well done, everybody enjoy your break. So they take, I think, like 2 months off, January, February. Holly can't go anywhere because she is dead. And so she just like stays in her tiny apartment. They give her like a very small like paycheck. I think it was like a couple $100 a month or something. And they pay for like this shitty apartment or whatever. So she just sits there for 2 months. We don't see any of that. They come back and they pick the new Scrooge. And the new Scrooge is Ethan Winters. And the first thing that we learn about Ethan Winters is that he's hot. I've talked about this before, where I find like thirsty point of view characters really annoying or whatever. But like, despite the fact that she finds him hot and like they do end up having a romance, it's kind of like it cools down another like 10% of the way. Then it's just kind of like, they're seeing each other, so that's like not that big a deal. But at first I was like, oh no, don't make me hate this kid more. She didn't. Credit is where credit's due, like I hated her pretty much the same amount the whole way through, no, actually that's not true. I'll get into it in a little bit. And as they're like getting ready to like take on this new Scrooge, Holly is introduced to an intern at Project Scrooge whose name is Stephanie. And Stephanie is kind of visually the opposite of Holly. Like, she's blonde. She's not stylish, apparently. Like, she just kind of dressed like kind of quirky and I almost picture like blonde Jessica Day from New Girl. So Stephanie is kind of hired, and Holly's like, what the fuck? And then I think Holly's like kind of weirded out and thinks that maybe she's training her replacement or something like that. And then the boss, whose name is, I think, Boz, is like, nah, don't worry, you're not going anywhere, but, this is our intern, this is your assistant, you cannot get rid of her. So Holly's super mean to this kid, and makes her go for coffee runs that she's not actually like authorized to do and all that stuff. Some of Holly's team, because she's like tech support and other kinds of help, everyone's hitting on this new girl and Holly's like, ugh, whatever, and all this shit. It's boring. Like they're just kind of setting things up to happen. And I think Holly's out walking somewhere and she sees a woman who used to be her childhood best friend, and so in like Holly's Christmas Carol experience, where she's the one being haunted, I think she's not old enough to have had that. I forget. I think the character's name is Belle in A Christmas Carol, the one who broke Scrooge's heart and kind of turned him in. Like Belle did nothing wrong, but was just kind of like, man, you too selfish. I don't fuck with that. I'm out of here. So then bounces, right? So I think so that person in Holly's life was actually her platonic best friend, whose name is Ro. And so Holly sees Ro out in New York and is like, what the fuck? And then she kind of like stalks her for a little bit and watches her go on a date and calls her old, but she's like 23 at this point. I'm like, what do you mean old? Like, even when I was 23 and was working as a youth worker, my 17-year-old students didn't call me old. So like when I said I don't know if this is like a spot on adolescent girl voice that the author is like using, or if this is way off and sort of like this is an adult's best impression of what they think a teenager is like, but it's actually way off, kind of like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Shaggy was definitely invented by a middle-aged man's understanding of what a teenager was at that time, but no one was quite like that, you know what I'm saying? And then this is where I started taking notes, because then my curiosity or my interest was kind of piqued by this scene where Ro is on a date, and Ro's talking about herself a little bit, about how she wants to be a writer. And you ever notice that a lot of books have a character that either loves books or wants to be a writer? And she's talking about how her like mentor and hero figure was Holly's dad. And growing up, like Ro's mom and Holly's biological mother were like best friends, and or were very close friends at the very, or were good friends at the very least. And and Ro would sneak into this guy's library, which was full of novels that authors would send him, hoping that that he would turn their books into movies and stuff like that. Which I didn't know that was a thing, but that's cool. And so she really liked reading and stuff, and went off on how this guy found her in the library and was like, yeah, you can borrow any books that you want. It was like really sweet with her, and they're still in contact, and they're still. He's still kind of a mentor and a hero to her, and she wants to be a writer and all this stuff, and never mentions Holly. And Holly's listening in and is like, when are you going to talk about me? When are you going to talk about me? And I was like, go fuck yourself, dude. Like, you didn't even know this kid wanted to be a writer, and she's wanted to be a writer her whole life. Like, you were a shitty friend. Like, why are you whining right now? You should be like, damn, I'm an asshole. I didn't even know about my best friend's dream. My best friends know all about my dreams, okay? And they're good listeners. Shout out Sunshine. So that was my first kind of hope that Holly was going to have sort of like emotional growth and change as her character. I think what I was hoping for is like, we're in the spoilery part, so I don't feel bad saying this now. What I was hoping for was like she was going to realize that she really did squander her life. And I know in A Christmas Carol, I knew this when I was thinking it, that in A Christmas Carol, you end up getting a second chance at life, and you have to change. What I was hoping for is like, damn, I blew it, but I guess like that's the value in doing the work that I do. And so I'm going to live out this afterlife doing this, and then maybe I'll get to move on at peace with how I, tried to make amends for the life that I lived. And I thought that would be like an adult kind of taking ownership of like the shitty person they used to be, and moving on. And that's not exactly what happened, but that's what I was hoping for. I like a bittersweet ending. I don't love Hollywood endings too much. I like bittersweet endings most of the time. And I know I'm kind of like a minority in that, but I don't like character deaths, but I think that character deaths or severe character injuries, where whatever, like in fantasy, where there's an actual impact and it matters and it's permanent. I like stuff like that, where I haven't read it, but I know, like, for example, I think it's The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Is that what it's she has the series that isn't the prior to the Orange Tree series. A character like gets injured real bad in book 1, and then in like book 6 still moving differently because of that. But even in like the old Mad Max movies, dude doesn't shake off like crazy injuries. Like in the third movie, he's still feeling stuff that we saw him go through in the first movie. I kind of like that stuff because even though it's a fantasy, I like that realism. I like the idea that things have consequences. That doesn't happen here, and that's part of why I hate this book. I hate this book. It's fine, like it's so fine. It is aggressively okay. And I think that if this sounds fun, if for some reason I've made it sound fun to you, definitely go read it. I didn't enjoy it. I had no fun with this. I really did like that scene. And I think, even though I do think it's kind of weird that authors kind of romanticize writers in their books or romanticize books in their books, it makes sense because that's what they're passionate about. That's why they're fucking authors. It'd be really weird like if an author is like, yo, fuck reading, dog, but it also has written like 8 books or something. I can see if I ever wrote a book and I had to do internet or interviews, I would probably, someone's like, so what do you like to read? I'd be like, fucking nothing, dog, just as a joke. And then BuzzFeed grabs a hold of that. I got off track there. There was a line in that scene, without stories, we're all just lonely islands. And after I stopped thinking about I'm on a boat by the lonely island, I was like, yeah, that's a good line, and I get what you mean. And I love stories, man. That's why I do this channel. Then my next note is it's really weird that Holly's chronologically in her 20s, but is thirsting after a 17-year-old Scrooge. Not Ebenezer Scrooge when he's 17. That would actually be kind of interesting. No, it still would be weird, but the time travel stuff would be weird or interesting, I guess. Anyways, but like she makes a big deal about not being like the boss at her job, not letting her participate in like champagne celebrations with the rest of the company. She's like, I'm in my 20s, but she's physically 17 still, and I guess maybe mentally 17 still. And I just found that kind of weird because there is like, she thinks of herself as both 17 and also like 23, kind of. And so because that's kind of messy, that makes the age difference and the whole like, this is a fantastical creature, which I know that's kind of harsh, but fantastical creature with a teenager thing. And I've never liked that. Even in like, I never mentioned it in like when I reviewed Lightlark or Nightbane, but like I thought it was really weird that, these dudes are like 500 years old, but they're fighting over a 19-year-old. I don't know. I just think that's weird. And I understand like that age difference thing. Like it's fantasy or whatever. And some people say it's not that deep, but it just makes me feel kind of gross. I never read Twilight, never seen. No, that's not true. I saw 2 of the Twilight movies against my will, but like I didn't like it then. I mean, it's weird. I don't like it. Because I think if nothing else, it kind of sets up the example of like it's okay to go after older men, and I don't think that should be encouraged because, like, I don't like dudes my age going after teenagers. I think it's gross, and maybe that's a bit of a reach. Maybe I'm overthinking it. That's just how I feel about it. And yeah, I'm not interested in debating with anybody. That's just my opinion. It gives me the ick. It's another bookish pet peeve. Anyways, moving on. Holly wants to meet or see Ethan Winters. Like she just wants to see him. She wants to be near him. So she like sneaks off to the country club or the fitness center or whatever that he hangs. It's like a country club, but it has a fitness center in it, and he swims a lot. She knows this because she's been sifting through his memories while she's doing her job as the ghost of Christmas past. That's not a weird thing to say. So she goes and hangs out at the pool that he's at, and she gets hit on by some older dudes, and she tells him to fuck off and says she's 17 or whatever. And then Ethan talks to her a little bit, and then they kind of have a quick chit chat, and she asks him to pretend to be her boyfriend to scare off or like to drive away the old dudes that were just trying to hit on her. And then they agree to like meet up again, and she doesn't give him her name because she can't, because she's dead. But then she's like, I'll find you and whatever. And he's just like, okay, super weird. And then she finds him again because her whole company is stalking him. So she knows the info she needs to know where he's going to be and when. So she like finds him again and orchestrates these dates and figures out times and places, mostly like in the middle of the night, where they can meet. And they go on dates and they kissed, and I hate it. I think it's weird. One time when they were doing a memory sift, so visiting him at night, spraying him with deep sleep spray that smells like lavender, and then sticking the things on her forehead, and then like reading his past. They've updated the things, so now instead of her like just seeing everything and then having to fill out paperwork, the tech guys figured out how they can monitor her brain to see what she's seeing and all that shit. And so it almost goes awry because Ethan is dreaming about Holly. So, oh no, but it was like, again, the tension just wasn't really there. So I wasn't like, oh, what's going to happen? I'm like, yes, it's fine. Like nothing, it's too early in the book for things to hit the fan, I was like, whatever. I think something goes wrong with another memory sift, or like this might be the same night, but something goes wrong with the equipment, or something goes wrong with Holly's powers, and she ends up kind of going through her own memories. And we learn that Holly's failed Nope. That's not what happened. I'm sorry. I don't remember how we learned this, but we find out that Holly's failed rehabilitation, so she like makes her housekeeper work on Christmas Day. So it leaves the housekeeper is a single mom, and it leaves her daughter at home alone, and the kid gets hungry, so she tries to cook something for herself, and she burns down her house and dies. And Holly's like, "Damn, I mean, I was in the oven. That's not on me." And again, like I understand there's supposed to be like this like moment of like struggle of like, damn, maybe I am an asshole, but I'm like, is it like too little too late or whatever? And I think if the character had really been like, wow, that's a shitty thing that I'm like kind of responsible for, and I feel bad about it, and I'm never going to be able to make up for that, that moment could have changed my opinion of this character or how I feel about this character. But like, so like at Project Scrooge, they're like, oh, we need to find, Ethan's Belle. We need to find this person that he was in love with that broke it off with him because of the money grubbing, selfish ways that he has, and we need to find that person to show him that breakup scene or whatever. And they're trying to identify who it is, and it's difficult because he's 17. He's not old enough to have fallen in love in that, like, and then have his heart broken in that like life course altering kind of way. And then they're like, maybe he's falling in love right now, and Holly cannot handle the idea of this dude falling in love with someone who isn't her. Ethan is all hers because she's selfish. She plans to somehow sabotage the whole Project Scrooge operation, and I guess Ethan's life. I guess like let him die or something. Shows up at Ethan's school and meets the kid who's supposed to be Ethan's Bob Cratchit stand-in. I think his name is Denton, or Dan Denton, maybe something like that. And Ethan's been bullying this dude and pulling pranks on him and stuff like that. But the kid's so positive and so sweet that it's kind of won Ethan over already. And they're kind of friends, even though Ethan thinks he's kind of weird and annoying. But there's still like there's a growing friendship there. And so it's like, oh, that's not very Scroogey of you kind of thing. And then later at Project Scrooge, the tech guys on Holly's team are like, does this guy even count as a Scrooge? Like, we're having such a hard time making his life fit into the mold of A Christmas Carol. I think it's because he doesn't like quite. He's a jackass, but he's not a Scrooge, And at this company meeting, it turns into a bit of an argument, and Stephanie gets like angry. Stephanie again is Holly's assistant, and she gets angry about this and like gets like adamant. And you can tell she's dating, I think, one of the tech guys. I think his name's Grant. I think she's dating him. And they've clearly had this fight before, and she was like, don't bring this up at the meeting, and he definitely did. And yeah, like my note is, I think that Stephanie knows Ethan or has some connection to Ethan, which would explain something. But I don't remember what I meant by something. Holly accidentally, I think, brushes up against Stephanie and reads a memory. And then Holly thinks that Stephanie is banging Dave, who is the ghost of Christmas Present. but he's also like a man in his 40s, or he was a man in his like 40s or whatever. And I was like, and then my note is, I'm pretty sure it's going to turn out that Dave and Stephanie are like father and daughter or something like that. This note makes absolutely no fucking sense. I do not know what I meant by this, but they go through the Christmas Carol procedure, and Dave is a nosy bastard. Oh, right. Okay, I remember. Holly has been dating Ethan with a different name. So she says her name is Victoria Scott. And, they've, as Project Scrooge has been stalking this boy, they have learned the name Victoria Scott, and learned that he like considers her his girlfriend, and he's quite taken with her, and they think that this Victoria Scott is his Belle, because the first person they thought was his Belle was like a childhood crush of his, but they like nothing ever happened, so his heart could have never been broken. So like, okay, well clearly it's Victoria Scott. And Stephanie, who's been in on this whole like Holly's dating this dude thing all the time, and Holly are like, damn, that's not good, like how can you be the Belle when you're supposed to be the ghost? And also like how can you do the ghost thing now if you're he's gonna recognize you and shit, because like she's just putting on like a robe that glows and stuff like that. She didn't wear a mask. And Dave, the ghost of Christmas Present, is like, it's got to be this Victoria Scott person. We need to find out who this Victoria Scott person is. And everyone's like, we've done research. We don't know who this person is. There's no one with that name is in New York, dog. And he's like, yeah, well, it's got to be her and whatever. And so they're like supposed to have put it to bed and let it go. And the reasoning being like the Belle is clearly Ethan's older sister, who goes no contact with him because he's money obsessed and is like cold. But like in the middle of the haunting, Dave is like, yo, who's Victoria Scott, by the way? And I was just like, Dave, doesn't fucking matter now, dog. Like it's over. Like you didn't figure it out. You have the whole thing set and ready to go. Why do you care? And he just like wouldn't let it go. And I think that pissed me off. So then like near the end of the haunting, Holly can tell that it hasn't worked on Ethan. He doesn't care. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't buy it. So Ethan's going to fail, and then he's going to die. Because, like, apparently, like, any failed Scrooge, like, they pick a Scrooge, and they know that he's going to die shortly after Christmas. So Holly is like, oh, he's going to fail. He's going to die. And they're like, yeah, he's going to die at, like, 6:50 a.m. on Christmas Day. And Holly's like, that's fucking dope. Because also, I didn't mention this yet, but Dave is like, this is his final year of being the ghost of Christmas Present. And then he's going to move on to the great beyond. So they're going to need a new ghost of Christmas Present. And Holly's like, fuck it, dope. It's going to be Ethan. And then he and I can be shitty people in our afterlife forever and haunting motherfuckers. Stephanie and Holly are trying to reconcile because Stephanie had done some research on Holly behind her back, and Holly felt betrayed. Then she's like, oh, by the way, like, it's weird that you're banging Dave and also dating Grant, and he's like old enough to be your dad. And then Holly's like, he is my dad. And it turns out that Stephanie was or is the ghost of Christmas past. And Holly's like, but what about my job? I was like, no. I was your ghost of Christmas past. And even though Stephanie wasn't dead, she was the ghost of Christmas past because like her dad was some other Scrooge's Bob Cratchit, who died. And then the boss Boz was so moved by his story and who he was, like, hey, you want a job even though you dead? And so, yeah, we never learned like anything about Boz, by the way. Like, we don't know if he's immortal, if he's an angel, if he's God. We don't learn any of that shit. We just know that he's British, and he gives everyone a code name based off of a Charles Dickens character, and it's weird. And my note was, actually, that's a pretty good twist. I didn't see that coming. I really didn't. Like, I didn't think much of Stephanie other than I thought she was someone's replacement ghost or something like that. But, I thought she was also dead the whole time. And so, you got me. Well done. When I don't see it coming, I don't see it coming. And credit is where credit's due. And then Holly interrupts the ghost of Christmas yet to come's haunting of Ethan and just blows the whole thing. And it's like, this is what's going on. This is what's going to happen if you don't change as a person. and you gotta change because you deserve to live a happy life and all this shit. And everyone's furious with her. Everyone's mad. You know, she gets fired from Project Scrooge, and then I'm like, okay, great, awesome. This is gonna be cool. There's like how do we move on from here? You know, like that kind of shit. And I'm like, it can't just be, oh well, you know what? That actually turns out that actually worked, and it's gonna be fine. And you're promoted. You know, you have my job now, and you can run Project Scrooge. I didn't know, but I was like, there's gonna be some kind of ramification here, and it's gonna be crazy. You know, like this is where this for me the stakes were so high in the sense of like there's no getting around this. You know, like this is big. This matters. And then she gets hit by a car again and dies again, and then wakes up 5 years in the past on the day she died, Christmas Day, 5 years in the past. And it's basically it was all a dream, and I'm so mad that I didn't see that coming because it's a fucking Christmas Carol, so of course. And so she's like, so she wakes up and she's like, oh my God, the last 5 years didn't happen. I've learned my lesson. I'm so hype. So she's like, oh my God, Elena, housekeeper, go home. I'm so sorry. You know, like we're going to figure out how to give you like vacation pay. You know, you get the month off or whatever. Go be with your daughter. Please go be with your daughter. And then she runs to her former best friend, Rose's house, who is back to being a 17-year-old. And she tries to reconcile. She's like, I'm sorry. You know, we grew apart. We're different, blah, blah, blah. But like, she basically like quotes the breakup speech that Ro gave to her when they stopped being friends, and was like, I want to be friends. I know I ain't perfect, blah, blah, blah. And then Ro's like, all right, we can figure this out and we can accept each other's differences and all that shit. And that was a pretty sweet emotional scene. And that I was touched. I was emotionally touched by that because I'm a sucker for the power of friendship.
Unfortunately, it's overshadowed by all this unyielding rage!
And her dad calls and is like, hey, do you want to maybe... And before he can even answer, she's like, yeah, I'll travel anywhere. I'll go see you. I can't wait to see you. I love you, Dad. Gets a flight like day of, goes to, you know, New York. She goes to where she thinks Project Scrooge is, and it isn't there. And then she goes to the movies. And then she sees Boz, her old boss, who explains that they never actually give up on a Scrooge. And so now that she's finally learned her lesson and learned the true meaning of Christmas, she can have her second shot at life. And then I think this is a few days later. I don't think it's on actual Christmas Day or whatever. But she like goes and she finds Ethan's dad. Because I didn't mention this in review because it didn't feel important. But Ethan's dad died. And that's part of why they think he's so Scroogey. Because like I think every Scrooge has to experience loss of some kind as well as his breakup and all this stuff. And so she goes to the day that his dad's supposed to die and stops that from happening. Because like Ethan's 12 now because he was 17 in 2023, so he's 12 in 2017, I guess. But she still loves him, but not like that, but like cares about him because he was the catalyst for her change and giving her this new lease on life or whatever. And I was like, and I really hate that it was all a dream thing. And like, I think in A Christmas Carol, maybe just I grew up watching the Muppets Christmas Carol. That was kind of the only Christmas thing that I really enjoyed. Like I like Jim Carrey's The Grinch, and I like A Muppets Christmas Carol, and now I like Klaus. That movie, you seen that movie on Netflix? That movie bangs. If you haven't, go watch it. It's so good. And Nightmare Before Christmas. So I like 4 Christmas movies. I'm not a big Christmas guy, right? But I always thought I liked A Christmas Carol, but now I'm like, oh, I think I might just like the Muppets because that whole it's all a dream. Also, the other thing I think that's different here is that A Christmas Carol, it makes sense that it's all a dream. It wasn't 5 years. It was just like this all happened in a night. And he's like, oh, maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was like that was kind of part of it. But for this, where there were like all of that feels kind of like it was for nothing, and she doesn't have to deal with the ramifications of the mistakes that she's made. She gets to undo those mistakes and correct them. And I understand that's part of A Christmas Carol, and I understand that this book is exactly what it's supposed to be, but I don't like it. Again, I think it's exactly what it's supposed to be. And I think that it's probably ideal for its intended audience. And I think it would make a really fun movie. Like, I think it'd be a really fun movie. I don't know who would play this kid, but like I guess like Jenna Ortega would do a great job in this movie. It's pretty good. I hated every second of this. But yeah, I think this book would probably be like probably better suited for like a teenager who really liked one of the Christmas Carol movie adaptations or something like that. I think this would be really cool for them, but like I'm an adult man. It's not for me. And you know, like this book just wasn't for me, and that doesn't make it bad. Like I don't think this is poor quality. It's nothing like Iron Wing or Light Bane, so whatever. I think it's way better than that as far as like story structure, editing, craft, even like character depth. Even though I don't like this character, I think I would say it's a better like this character Holly Chase is more like characterized than I don't even remember what the fuck is the main character's name in Fourth Wing, Violet or Isla. Yeah, I think it's worth checking out. Or if you have like a teenager in your life who loves Christmas Carol movies, maybe recommend it for them for next year or something. I don't know. That's pretty much it for me. When you're watching this, I'm probably at a really awkward Christmas dinner with a bunch of family that don't like me. But yeah, Merry Happy, and thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel, support what I'm trying to do here, you can tip me / buy me a coffee. And if you want to support the channel on a more regular basis and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you get an extra rant review video a month, as well as access to like a live podcast, live comedy show, live stream type of thing that we do once a month, where you hang out with me and we chat about books and stories. I tell stories from my life, and just we hang out. It's a good time. Hey, what's happening is Editing D. You can tell by the headphones and the fact that I'm wearing a different sweater than in the video. I don't even know if this is an important detail to add at the end of the video, but I don't script my outros. Like it's a similar outro every time, but it's not written down anywhere. It's just kind of off the dome. I forgot to say that when you subscribe to my Patreon, you also gain access to my private Discord server, the Don't Fret Club Discord server, where everyone's talking about books and anime and video games and people showing pictures of their pets. There's some cool pets up in there, like lizards and snakes and dogs and cats and all that. Some people talk about D&D. Like I don't play D&D, but they're in there, and so it's a really good time. And we'd love to have you as part of that community. And I was really hesitant to say this in the outro. Like you won't see it, but there's like 30 seconds of footage of me just being like, should I say it? Should I not? Saying it, but like kind of half-assing it, whatever. But any Ko-Fi donations or whatever would be greatly appreciated because of the holiday and because of like the winter season, my job is really slowed down and I don't have like any or much income coming in for the next little bit. So anything is helpful, and that's no pressure, and I'm not begging or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, if ever you were like, maybe I will, maybe I won't, now would be a great time to do that because it would help. But I also understand the holidays are hard for everyone, and I ain't special, but just throwing it out there, that it would be greatly appreciated. But obviously no pressure. I'm hopefully going to be able to put out some extra or like work on some content more while I'm out of a job. Now there's like 10 seconds left of the main video, so I might as well just redo that bit now. Shout out to my super duper Don't Fret Club member Keisha. Keisha, thank you so much for your support. You're enabling me to do what I want to do and make more of this content, so thank you so much. The rest of y'all, if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. And for the rest of y'all, hope you have a good long weekend or whatever. Merry Happy, and thank you so much for watching. My name is D, and don't fret, I'll see you next time. Peace out.